All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and anyone who is joining the presentation right now. Stay tuned, hang in there. We are just waiting to hit critical mass, and then we'll get started. But just to be sure, you're here for the Maryland info session, and we're going to go over the basics of solar and the co-op itself. So just to make sure you're in the right place. And all right, I already see 36, 37 people on board already. So I'm going to give it another 20 seconds and then we're going to get started. And we'll start in 3, 2, 1. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 5th and final info session for the Maryland program this year. My name is Sukrit Mishra. I'm the program director for the DC region. I also support our programs in Maryland and Virginia. Usually these presentations are covered by our state director, Kimberly Armstrong. I'm sure some of you have had the pleasure to meet her, speak with her in some of our in-person events. She's out this week, so I'll be covering for her. And I am joined by our colleague, Christina Garcia. She'll be moderating the chat section today. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat and we'll try to get them as best as possible. And just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. So, just to set some ground rules here, we usually run these info sessions at noon, like the one today. And we usually have an attendance of, I would say, 15 to 20 people max. Given the recent developments in the last week or so, this is a bigger group. We had 88 RSVPs, of whom I see 46 people so far. Just to set some expectations, we will try to get to your questions as best as possible in the chat. And if we don't, we are not ignoring you. It's just that, it's a small group on our end. So we will be taking breaks in between. And, Christina will be running those questions by me. But for the sake of keeping this session to an hour, I will not be able to answer all of them. Questions that are pertaining to the recently passed IRA, I might not have all the answers simply because we are still formulating a comprehensive message around these questions internally at Sun. So you can always follow up with us at mdteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. We will be dropping this in the chat, so you're not missing anything, and we will get to you. As for this presentation itself, if you're just joining us, welcome aboard. This is the info session for the Maryland co-ops and the basics of solar, but you're not missing anything. I will be sending you a recording of this presentation tomorrow and any other resources, so you're not missing anything. As for the audio and all, I'm sure you can see that this is a one-way presentation. I will be going over our slide deck, and you don't have access to audio, but if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. And before I get into the bulk of the slide deck, we grow organically. We depend on word of mouth, and we cannot do this work without our partners. And these are some of the organizations we have had the pleasure of working with these past few years. One of the bigger ones is Mocha Green Bank, with whom we worked last year, and we are also collaborating with this year. I will go more into the details about their affiliation and the services they offer in the financing component, but we will be dropping their contact info in the chat as well. And I'm not sure if Cindy is joining us, but we will be dropping her information as well, and more to follow on that. And with that, let's just get started. For starters, just a reminder that we are a vendor neutral national 501c3 nonprofit. What that basically means is when it comes to any queries or information that we um, disperse to the public, we maintain a neutral stance. Oftentimes I get asked, tell me about this installer, or who would you pick in this region? In your experience, who is the best installer or who is better than this? We maintain a neutral stance. Our job is to educate the public on solar options or any technical questions, but we do not provide specific recommendations. And if we do, we use a customer's experience over there. It's not our point of view. So just putting it out there. And our mission is triple faceted. Number one, we help people go solar. This is either within our co-ops or outside our co-ops in the general public. Number two, if people are going solar with us, we help them congregate together, join together, and help them go solar. Number three, once people do go solar or once they already have a system up and running, we advocate for their rights and we fight for their energy rights. Progress is not a straight line. So oftentimes we do get pushback from other stakeholders in this business or utility providers, to put it mildly. And we do our best to represent solar owners, keep them posted on any major legislative updates and anything related to that. And in terms of our national impact, we have field staff across 12 states and Puerto Rico right now. These numbers are up to date. I just checked our CRM and our database earlier this morning. So as of 8 a.m. Eastern time this morning, we have helped more than 7,200 families in the United States go solar. That translates to 77 megawatts of solar. For folks who are not technically adept with these terms, that just means a whole lot of solar. And when I say solar, this is rooftop solar. And that translates to more than 1 million tons of carbon dioxide that's been saved or offset by running these solar systems. And we continue to expand. So, we are not stopping here. And as our business grows, we hope to expand beyond the 12 states that we are operating in. And a quick inception story in terms of how Sun got started. I'm based in DC myself, so, just to put it out there, but in terms of the inception, back in 2007, that's when we informally got started. The person you see over here is Anya Schoolman, who is our founder and executive director. And that's her son, Walter, and his friend, Diego. I'm not sure if you all remember this, but back in 2007, there was that big documentary on global warming around The Inconvenient Truth. They watched it in school, got inspired, came back home and just said, we have to do something about this, or, we can step up and chip in. And Anya, she got interested in solar in the district. She explored some options here and there. And she realized how pricey residential solar was almost 15 years ago and how tedious it was. There were a lot of bottlenecks and lots of potential roadblocks on the way. And that's when she ran the first bulk purchase campaign, which is our primary business model now. She helped 50 homes or neighbors in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood in Washington, DC, come together, aggregate them, pursued installers who helped them go solar. And that was officially our first campaign. And since 2007, we have used that blueprint, replicated that model, and we are running that across 12 states in the United States. And we continue to grow. And as of 2022, we have members in all 50 states. When I say members, these are members who may not be affiliated with the co-ops, but they're still pursuing our services. As of this morning, we have run 361 solar co-ops. And that translates to, as I said, more than 7,200 homes that have gone solar through our programs. And that's just a quick backstory. And yes, like I said before, triple faceted, we help people go solar with new and existing systems. Folks who have gone solar even outside the co-op, if they need our help, we still provide them resources and help them out. We join people together. Before the pandemic, we used to run these info sessions in person for the public. And we used to host in-person happy hours. Fingers crossed as COVID abates and goes away for good, or at least as the next phase gets less acute, we're hoping to host more of these sessions in person. And number three, like I said, any contentious issues such as metering, the rights pertaining to HOAs in your district or your neighborhood, we fight for your energy rights. And yes, the last component, which is a big part of our work, is we hope to make solar as widespread as possible so that we achieve economies of scale over time and we can address the goal of equity. One of our primary goals is helping folks in the LMI bracket or low to moderate income bracket achieve solar. This could be through the Solar for All program, which we're not running this year, but through other avenues where solar can be incentivized to become affordable for them in the long run. So making solar equitable is another one of our big goals. All right, with that, let's get into the presentation itself. This presentation is broken down into three components. The first one will be really technical. I will break down the basics of solar, what the panels look like, how the system works, the major components. The second part will go into the solar economics component. I'm sure that's why most of y'all are here. We will go into the average costs around solar in Maryland. We will go over the Inflation Reduction Act and the recent developments. We might not have all the answers, but I can give you a nice, just the basics of that reform and what it does for solar owners. And the last component will go over the two solar co-ops that we're running this year and how they work, the model, how they're better than going solar on your own in the open market, and how you can join them. And for starters, solar panels. How do they work? So in a nutshell, I'm sure you've seen this around your neighborhood, but they're also known as solar photovoltaic modules or solar photovoltaic cells, commonly abbreviated as PV. They're basically harnessing the sunlight that they're receiving in the daytime and converting it into a usable form of electricity for your household and other systems around your household. In terms of panels and what they look like, this picture on the left, it just shows you how, they look really elementary or basic, but they have a lot of subparts or subsegments. I'm not going to go into the details around this simply because this is more for the installer to understand. You do not have to know each of these components. What you do need to know is, number one, the dimensions when it comes to panels. On average, from what we have seen in the open market, they're around 3.5 by 5.5 feet long. And that's the average dimension. As these panels get more efficient year after year, we will see a small growth in that dimension simply to compensate for that volume. But for now, that's the traditional volume. When it comes to these panels, I'm sure you've seen this on rooftops. It's not just one panel that's sitting up there. It's usually a collection of them. So when you speak to installers, they're going to usually use the word solar array. That basically means a system of these modules or a collection of these modules that are intertwined in one system, a solar array, which is more than one module. Again, these are just basics, but this is how we start. We're going to start a bit slow, and I'm going to get into the more dense stuff later on. Number two, the panels, they don't just go directly on the roof, simply because this is done to preserve the physical integrity of the roof and the solar panels themselves. They'll go on top of what we call a racking system. And when it comes to racking systems, most roofs are a good fit for solar or these racking systems. The most common example that I've seen in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, or the DMV region, are asphalt shingle roofs. This example that you see over here, what is happening is they're drilling studs into the roof. Once that drilling happens, then that system is mounted on top of it. It's screwed in. And then any of those penetrations that are made, you're having flashings that are covering those penetrations simply to prevent any water damage or any leakage in the future. In terms of safety, just in terms of numbers, for example, we ran a co-op in Montgomery County and neighboring counties last year. SCW covered that co-op last year. I would say 80 to 85% of those roofs were asphalt shingles. People do get they had that question where they say, well, you're putting holes or drills in my roof. We had no issues or complaints from any of the customers in the co-op. So it was a win-win for everyone. So if that's your primary concern, it's a really safe process. And there are also warranties that preserve your rights. And I'll go more into that later. This is one example. It's an asphalt shingle roof. There might be other examples such as a flat roof or one without any slopes, a standing metal seam roof or what have you. Most roofs are good for this. Another example, like I said, was standing metal seam roof. This one involves no penetrations. It's basically a clip-on top of the roof. There's that space and it's still relatively easy to be done. We see more of these in row homes and townhomes in DC and Northern Virginia, but I'm sure there are a few of these in Maryland as well. This one was installed for one of our staff at Solar United Neighbors. Their name is Corey Ramsden. They're the vice president of our solar programs, and they got this done in 2018. So, just to put it into perspective, how safe this process is, even our staff members have pursued this. Having said all this, the only exception are slate roofs. They're the trickiest of the lot. So there might be instances where when you apply to the co-op or when you reach out to installers, it looks like a good roof, no shade or what have you. However, because it's a slate roof, it's a bit more fragile or complicated. A lot of installers will turn it down, or those who do take on that project will charge you a higher price or an added fee, simply because it's not the easiest of roofs to work on. So just an FYI. Having said all this, if you're still confused or you feel like you're in the gray area in terms of if your roof is qualified, you can always reach out to us. We do these roof reviews for co-op members and non-co-op members, as in the general public, for free. There's no cost involved. And we can go give our assessment just to let you know if your roof is a good fit. Moving on. So up till now, I covered rooftop solar. Now, as much as we would like that to work for everyone, we do have folks who are disqualified from the co-ops or folks who are not qualified for a rooftop solar. And that's where you have the alternative of a ground-mounted system or a ground mount solar. This is basically a system where the installer surveys your backyard or any area around your property. If there is sufficient space and what have you, a system can be mounted on the ground. The benefits are it can be customized or tilted in such a way that it's going to be receiving maximum sunshine or exposure during those peak daytime hours between 9 a.m. in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. So it's more efficient than a rooftop solar, depending on the slope that your roof has. On the flip side, this is a more complex operation. There's trenching involved. There's more labor involved around this. So it is pricier. We have seen installers offer this service in our co-ops as well, albeit at an added fee. It's usually a fixed fee, but that is how it works. Let's see. Okay. And then when it comes to inverters, there are usually two kinds of inverters or inverters that we've seen in the market, in the co-ops and even outside the co-ops. And what inverters basically do is they're effectively converting the energy from DC or direct current to AC or alternating current. They're doing this to basically make the electricity converted into a usable form of electricity for your household. That's just what they're doing. Now there are two forms over here. As you can see on the left, this is a string inverter. This is a bit more basic model. And then something we have seen more that's more state-of-the-art and more popular in the market are the microinverters. String inverters, it's usually just one inverter for the whole system. If it's a larger system, sometimes the installer proposes two central string inverters. It just depends on your system size. When it comes to benefits, it is cheaper than your microinverter. On the flip side, let's say you have some shade on your roof or some other obstacles during those peak sun hours or sunlight hours. A string inverter won't be as effective or efficient as a microinverter. That's where those DC optimizers that you see over here are integrated into the system, but it will still not be as effective as a microinverter. Microinverters are where these microinverters are basically embedded below each panel itself. So you'll have just as many microinverters that you have panels on your rooftop. And their benefits are, although they're pricier than your string inverter, it will be easier to monitor each of these panels on that system while they're instantaneously producing their electricity. You'll have a monitoring system and access to it to be able to monitor if it's working up to the level that's been promised to you. Number two, even though they're more sophisticated, let's say there's some breakdown or some issues in the future, it will be easier to troubleshoot that system. So that's another added benefit around this system. And number three, oftentimes we have co-op members and folks in the general public who are a bit more conservative. They start with a smaller system and then they decide to expand it in the future. And if that's one of your plans where you're trying to err on the side of, stay on the side of caution and then maybe expand it in the future, depending on its performance, a microinverter would be, it's well set to do that. So that's just another benefit. At the end of all this, it just depends on what your roof looks like, what your preferences are, and we leave it to the installer to customize your system and guide you through this whole process. So we have covered the panels, we have covered the microinverter. This is the third component of that whole solar system, and it's the electric panel. It's basically the distribution system. Once the inverters have converted your electricity or power from DC, direct current, to AC or alternating current, it goes to the electric panel, and the electric panel is gauging wherever your most pressing electricity demands are across the household. And based on that, it's distributing that power in the most efficient manner possible. In most cases, your electric panels should be fine. However, there are instances where your home or the panel might be so antiquated or so old that when the installer is surveying this, they might recommend a change or an upgrade to that electric panel. They will usually do this as a part of a complimentary service, albeit at an added fee. But again, this is something the installer will walk you through. So we have covered all those important components when it comes to the system. Just a couple more terminologies here when it comes to solar. These are the two terms that you'll most commonly see in your consultations with the installer and just out there when you're doing your own research. The first one is kW or kilowatts. It's abbreviated as kW. That's basically how you measure the system size or capacity. For example, so remember when I said the solar array a couple of slides earlier? So what you see here is a solar array of 12 panels. Assuming each of these panels has a capacity or a size of 350 watts, you multiply that by 12 and you get 4,200 watts, which is 4.2 kilowatts. That's your system size or capacity. That's fixed. Kilowatt hours though, that's your production. That's how much your system is producing over some given period or given set amount of time. This is also the value that you see on your utility bills or electricity bills. And this is what varies from system to system. Oftentimes we have folks in the same neighborhood who say, well, I have the same system size or something relatively similar to a neighbor. However, when it comes to the system output, their system is much more productive than mine. And that's where the kilowatts differ. It just depends on what your roof looks like. And I'll go more into the details around this, but kilowatt hours differ or vary from system to system. In Maryland itself, on average, we have seen systems anywhere from 4 kilowatts to 9 kilowatts. And again, this depends on your system size. This depends on your goals for the system, basically. What's your average electricity consumption across the year or across a specific season? What is your budget in terms of how much you can afford or how much you can effectively offset on your utility bills? So when it comes to sizing your system or customizing your system, the installer will walk you through the process and they'll ask for your preferences or what your goals are. All right, so I've gone over each of those critical components, what they look like, the terminologies. This is what it looks like on a diagram. So there are 4 parts, like I said. The first one are the panels or the solar array. Number two, the solar inverter. Number three, the electric panel. And lastly, the utility meter. And this is what the process looks like. For starters, you have the system that's absorbing or harnessing that sunlight, converting it instantaneously from DC or direct current to AC. And that takes place through the inverter. Once that conversion takes place, that electricity then goes to the electric panel, which is like the central nervous system. It determines where your most critical loads are, and it distributes it in the most effective way possible. And that's where the last part comes in, which is net metering. And this is a bit complicated, so I'll try and break it down as simple as a concept as possible. But oftentimes during those peak daytime hours or summer days where you might not be at home, your system might be producing more than you're consuming during that time. And that electricity that's a surplus or anything that is it's producing in excess, it does not go to waste. That excess power goes back to the grid. It does not go to waste, it goes back to the grid. And then during, after sunset or during those winter months where your system is not as productive, those credits are coming back to you, or that excess power is being supplied back to you, and it's basically offsetting your electric bill. And that's the benefit of solar. It's not just offsetting your electric bills during those peak suntime hours, but also when your system's not as productive. You can use those benefits of net metering to effectively offset any other component of your bill. Now, this is what it looks like in terms of, okay, we do not have this slide here, but in terms of numbers, let's say over a set amount of time, you exported or your system produced an excess of 300 units or 300 kilowatts that goes out to the grid. And then let's say during those less productive months or productive hours, you took 500 kilowatts or 500 units from the grid. You're not paying for those 500 units. Any of that surplus, which is 300, that's deducted from that, and you're effectively paying 200 kilowatt, a bill on 200 kilowatt hours. I know this is complicated, but if you have more questions, I'm sure Christina has dropped it in the chat, but you can reach us at mdteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. We also have an FAQ on this, which is in the chat. So we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have around this. So what makes a good roof for solar? There are usually three factors when it comes to this. Number one, it's the roof orientation. Installers ideally look for roof fronts that are facing the southern direction. That's the most optimal or ideal orientation for a roof. Any roof that faces the eastern or western direction is still a good fit, and they will be approved for solar. The only exception is any roof that faces the northern direction. I will not go into too much into the astronomy here, but living in the northern hemisphere, we are leaning into the equator, which explains why south-facing roofs are more ideal. And even during those peak sun or daytime hours in the summer months, even if you install the system on a north-facing roof, in most cases, it will not be economically viable or justify a good payback period for you. So that's one of the factors. Number two, when it comes to shading, installers ideally look for roofs with minimal roof shade or any other structures that are casting shade during those peak suntime hours or daytime hours. If you feel like you're in a 50-50 case here where you have trees around your property, you can send it our way. We'll be happy to look into it and just assess if it's a good fit for solar. And number three, installers usually look for adequate roof space. There's, in terms of a magic number, they usually look for at least 200 square feet of open roof space, minimal disturbances, where they can mount a system or install these panels. And same goes for shade. If you do see shade on your roof, as long as there's no shade on at least 200 square foot of open space, you should be fine. If you have vents or any, say dormers or any other mini structures on your roof, as long as they're not affecting that open roof space, you should be fine. But again, there are exceptions. If you have questions, you can always reach out to us and we're happy to help you out with this. And having said all this, like I said, not every roof is a good fit for a rooftop solar. There are exceptions. One of the alternatives that I did provide was a ground mounted system. This is another alternative to that, which is community solar. This is basically an option or an alternative where you can still redeem the benefits of solar. So for example, over here, what happens in community solar is it's an offshore site where you're effectively leasing or renting out some of these panels or these solar arrays. It has a fixed value or a fixed system size that you're leasing or renting at, at a lower price than owning the system, obviously. And the benefits of that is over a fixed period of time, whatever energy or electricity that system is producing in kilowatt hours, you're getting credits for that production. And you can use those credits to offset your electricity bill from the utility provider. So on the upside, you're still redeeming the benefits of solar energy. It's a good alternative. If your roof is not a good fit for solar, you're still offsetting your electricity bills. On the flip side, just read through the fine print, just see where those SRECs and any of those tax credits are going. So that's something to consider. And if you have any questions about your contract, you can send it our way and we'll be happy to look through that stuff and just let you know what you're benefiting from and what are some of the drawbacks. And we do have an FAQ on this, which is over here. This is a link. I believe Christina will be dropping it in the chat, but I will also be following up tomorrow and I'll be sending you this link as well. And lastly, just to wrap up this first section, so, the battery backups. So in recent year, given some of the weather that we've seen in Florida and Texas and elsewhere, there has been more traction and interest from our members and folks in the public about batteries. So just to clear, before I get into this, just a misconception that people usually have is when the power grid goes down, they have this assumption that, well, I have solar panels on my roof. That should take care of it. They're gonna continue to provide electricity to my household, and the grid will not affect it. It will not affect me. That's not quite true. As a safety mechanism, when the electric grid goes down, your solar system is shut off as well. It's shut off because we do not want any excess power that it's producing going back to the grid, where you might have utility providers or third-party providers working on the grid to restore it. It's just a safety mechanism. So this is where a battery backup might be useful. So if you know that you live in a region in Maryland that suffers from sporadic or frequent utility outages, or if you know that you live in a household where you might have critical medical equipment or some other electric load that can never go offline and needs to be online 24/7, or you just want to be prepared for emergencies just in general, a battery backup might be a good option for you. And how that works is once you have the solar system installed, you can also opt for this. The installer will integrate this to the solar system. And what happens then is if there is a widespread outage that affects the rest of the neighborhood, if you have these two systems integrated together, your system will still be running and you'll still be powering up your home using that battery backup. The only thing we recommend is, this is a luxury product. Just because you have a battery backup, you can't just power every single electric load or power load in your household. Even if you have a backyard jacuzzi and what have you, I would recommend not powering that using a battery backup. Use this for more critical loads, which can never go offline. And again, this, with each passing year, like solar, as we have seen in the last 15 years, the battery technology is evolving year after year. It's getting better. It is still a pricey option right now. On average, I've seen a battery option add anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 extra on top of solar. So just think carefully about this. Now, that new language around the ITCs does help. I'll go more into this later on, or the tax credits. That does help, but this is still a pricey addition. And for more information on battery options and the battery guide, here's a resource, and you can also find this in the chat. And this is another edition that we have had since 2018 or 2019 in our co-ops, as there has been more traction around this. It's to do with EVs or EV chargers. Since 2018 or 2019, this is something we have also offered to co-op members in our programs. But if you know that you have an EV or you're looking to add an EV to your existing fleet, this is a nice consideration. Installers can integrate the EV charger to your solar system. You're not just using the solar system to power up your home, but you're also using it to fuel your EVs overnight. The charging unit, it ranges, based on market rate, it ranges anywhere from $500 to $700. The installation itself, depending on the workmanship and some of the other factors, it's anywhere from $500 to $2,000. And the total cost range anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500. Depending on the brand, it can be more than that. You can go for more discounted versions or brands. It just depends on what your goals are and what your budget is. In terms of the brands out there or the models out there, it's usually broken down into two categories. There's a more basic one, which is a level 1 charger. You can use this charger and connect this to any existing power outlet in your home. It just requires a 120 volt outlet, fairly standard. That's the benefit in terms of accessibility. The flip side is if you do use your EV a lot, it has a much slower charging speed. The usual charging speed is anywhere from 4 to 6 miles of charge per hour. So it does take its sweet time, which is where the level 2 chargers are more mainstream and more popular among customers. That usually requires a 240 volt outlet. It does offer faster charging speed. This is usually installed using a professional electrician. You will have to pursue a third party or an installer can provide the service. It provides a much faster charging speed of anywhere from 10 to 30 miles per hour. And when it comes to warranties around these, they usually have a warranty of 3 years. And then there's an added warranty around the workmanship. And this varies from installer to installer or the company you're working with. And lastly, some of the frequently asked questions around our co-ops and just pertaining to solar. When it comes to warranties, the solar system itself usually has a warranty of 25 years. Some installers are offering a more premium product. It's usually called a Solar Insure, which goes up to 30 years. It just depends, but it's anywhere from 25 to 30 years. When it comes to inverters, the basic inverters usually have a warranty of 10 to 12 years. The micro inverters have a warranty of up to 25 years, but again, it depends on the installer or the brand you're working with. When it comes to EVs, like I said, it's an average warranty of 3 years, and there's an added workmanship of anywhere from 1 to 2 years, depending on the brand or the company. When it comes to homeowners insurance, there is a misconception that depending on where you reside, from what we have heard, if you install or add a solar system to your roof, it's going to hike up your insurance rates substantially. That's not quite true. What we recommend is work with your realtor and some of the other stakeholders, walk them through the process and look for your options. This is actually seen as a nice adder to your system in the current day and age, and it should not be affecting your insurance rates so adversely. Number 3, maintenance. One of the big benefits when it comes to solar systems is once you install that system, it just sits there, it does the bulk of your job, and it requires minimal maintenance for the first 25 to 30 years of its lifetime. It just sits there, producing electricity, offsetting your bills, minimal maintenance required. In the off chance that something does go wrong with one of the panels, the inverter, or any other components, you may have a warranty package that covers that, or we just recommend not going up there to troubleshoot that yourself, because your warranty provisions from the installer should be able to address that problem or cover that. So we never recommend folks going up there to, assess or troubleshoot them themselves. Like I said, the system's longevity, it provides peak performance for the first 25 years. And there is an average degradation every year, like any other electronic gadget out there. But this is a sturdy system. When it comes to HOAs, again, the misconception is I'm automatically disqualified if you live in a specific neighborhood or what have you. That's not quite true. Just walk them through the whole process, unless it's stipulated in your contract when you signed up for that home and what have you, where they forbid solar, they cannot forbid you or stop you from going solar. So it's not quite binary. They can't just forbid you unless it says so in the contract. Walk them through the whole process, and if you have more questions about this, you can reach out to our team. Lastly, when it comes to historic districts, if you do reside in one in Maryland, let your installer know. They will take it into consideration when they're customizing or designing your system, and they will customize it in such a way that it's either not facing a public point of view or public street, or they'll ensure that it adheres to local laws and regulations. So even if you live in a historic district, you should still be fine. And before I get into the second part, I do see quite a few questions, and I might not be able to get to all of them, but Christina, any questions or anything that we were not able to answer?
Sure. We have a current question about snow. If the panels are covered with snow, would they produce any power?
I believe they should. I mean, I don't think there should be any problem with that. And if you do reside in a region with excess snow and what have you, there is an adder option when it comes to the system, such as a snow guard. Or if you live in a region with a lot of critters or squirrels and what have you, there's also the addition of critter guards. So installers do offer that on top of the system. But if you do have snow, that should go away by itself. It might adversely affect it to some degree, but it shouldn't be such a big cause for concern. And I think Corey is also on the chat. So, any other questions, or are we good to go?
I think you can continue.
Are we good for now? Okay, cool. I do see like quite a few bubbles, but okay. Moving on. Second part, solar economics. So I will get into the IRA stuff, but for starters, as I said, since our inception, back then solar was almost 3 to 4 times more pricey, but this is a great investment. As more and more folks go solar with the incentives and what have you, costs have dropped by almost 73% since the past decade. It used to be seen as a premium luxury or niche product. Not anymore. It's not a boutique project anymore. It's becoming increasingly affordable year after year. And even with the upfront costs in solar, it offers a reasonable payback period, and the return on investment is massive over its lifetime. And as for the federal tax credit, it used to be at 26% up till a couple of weeks ago, until we received that surprising but welcome news around the Inflation Reduction Act. But the federal tax credit, or ITC, as they call it, it's also known as solar tax credits. It was at 26% this year. It was going down to 22% next year, and then it was going down to 0% from 2024 onwards. Not anymore. It's now been set at 30% according to the Inflation Reduction Act. It's going to remain at 30% for the next decade through 2032. And then after that, it's going to be a gradual step down. If you're interested, in 2033, it's going to go down to, I believe it's to 26%. In 2034, it's going to go down to 22%, and then it'll be gone altogether. But for the next decade, it's set and secure at 30%. And I will go more into details around that, but that's one of the big things around the Inflation Reduction Act. As for the solar costs from the installer's point of view, you do not have to understand each of these big numbers over here. What you do have to know is the bulk or majority of the costs, anywhere from 50 to 60% of those costs for installers, are soft costs. What that means are these are any costs that pertain to marketing, customer acquisition, permitting, or any of the other backend work that goes on for the installer. And the reason we're showing this is, this is where our co-op model is so effective. When we run those co-ops, which is built, it revolves around the bulk purchase model, and more on this in the last part, we're effectively eliminating a substantial chunk of those soft costs for the installer. And this allows them to offer these co-ops or run these co-ops at a more competitive price as compared to going solar on your own. So that's, that's the gist of this model, or how we actually, or why our bulk purchase is so competitive compared to going solar on your own. And like I said, I'm not sure if you can see it with this bubble, but it used to be that the federal tax credits are decreasing. Like I said, the old model was 26% this year, 22% next year, and then gone altogether. Not anymore. With the new federal laws, according to the IRA, it's now at 30%. It's going to remain at 30% for the next decade. And then there's going to be a step down process. So also known as solar tax credits, if you have a large enough federal tax liability or what have you on your tax returns, 30% of that can be claimed on your solar system, and that's effectively offsetting the costs on your solar system. So that's an added incentive if you needed one to go solar. If this year, great, but even in the long-term future, given the recent reforms. And this is what it looks like in terms of the pricings that we have. And I feel like this will help out more if you see it through the numbers. But what you see here is an example of a 4 kilowatt system, which is a relatively smaller system, and the larger system of a 8 kilowatt. You can't see it with my face over here, but we're going to use this left column of a 4 kilowatt system as an example. So the first row, assuming an average installation rate in Maryland, based on the recent trends we have seen, of $2.70 a watt. For a 4 kilowatt system, you multiply those two numbers. So that's $10,800. If you apply, or if you qualify for federal tax credits or solar tax credits at 30%, you apply 30% on that total cost, and that gives you a deduction of $3,240. In addition to that, residents of Maryland have that access to that grant of $1,000. If you take this down, after all those deductions, it comes down to a net cost of $6,560. That's your upfront cost for a 4 kilowatt system. Over the long term, since you have gone solar, you're effectively not paying the same utility bills that you were, because now you're powering your household or some part of that household through solar, which means based on our estimates and what have you, over the first year, you're saving somewhere around $750. Over 10 years, that number goes up to around $7,800. And over the solar system's lifetime of 25 years, you're saving upwards of $22,000. And then there's that last component over here, which is called SRECs, or Solar Renewable Energy Credits. And I'll try to make this as simple as possible, but one incentive is the solar ITCs, or federal tax credits, at 30%. This is the second incentive. So this is a production incentive for homeowners who go solar. And basically, for every 1,000 kilowatt hours or 1 megawatt hour that your system produces, you receive a virtual credit. That's what this is. It's an SREC. It's a virtual production incentive that is given to you as a reward for going solar. When you receive these credits, you can go to solar brokers. There are two big ones in the region, SREC Trade and Sol Systems. You can sign a contract with either one of them, depending on how much risk you would like to leverage or how much risk you would like to use. There are varying rates. You might go for the market rate. It's like a stock exchange or stock market. So those values do fluctuate. You might go for the market rate. You might want to play it safe and just say, I will go for a longer term SREC contract, so 5 years or 10 years or what have you, depending on whichever broker is offering that option. Or it just depends on whatever you want to go with. The value that I've put over here, this is the safest option. This is the most conservative option. This is basically you locking in a below the market rate for 15 years, and you're basically setting that price for the next 15 years. And based on that estimate, you're getting $920 over the system's lifetime in SREC value. This is on top of that incentive of the tax credits. So if you sum this all up, even with that upfront cost of around $6,500, you're retaining a net profit after 25 years of around $16,500. If you double that system, that goes up to around $32,000 to $33,000 for an 8 kilowatt system. Again, these are estimates, depends on the SREC contract that you have, depends on how productive your system is, or how much shading and all those factors are. So these are just estimates. Financing options. The most ideal option is if you have, if you have that budget, or if you have that option, you can buy out the system upfront in cash. Having said that, there are loan options, and we do have a link around this on our page, and we'll drop this in the chat section as well. But there are financing options for folks in Maryland. Now there are 2 co-ops. So just to be specific here, for folks who live in Montgomery County, we are partnering, or we do have partners with Mocha Green Bank. And for folks who joined the co-op earlier this year, up until last month, there used to be that language where we were partnering with them with their Access Solar product. And this was for folks whose family income was $97,500 or less per household. They were working with SES, or they had that option with SES in the co-op earlier this summer. Unfortunately, due to recent developments, that partnership is not available anymore. However, if you would still like to pursue some options with Mocha Green Bank, you can reach out to Cindy McCabe, who's their program manager over there. Christina, I believe her contact information can be provided in the chat section, but I'll be happy to send this over as well. But if you would like to pursue some financing options with Green Bank, you can do so outside the co-op. Besides the loans, there's the option of leasing solar, either through community solar, what have you, or a PPA agreement or power purchasing agreement. What that basically means is you get the system installed on your rooftop. It's done usually at a minimal upfront value, or really low, or sometimes even for free by the developer. You are retaining the benefits of solar. It's producing energy. In exchange for that, you're paying that third-party developer or whoever installed that a fixed below the market rate for each kilowatt hour. It's still cheaper than paying the utility and not going solar. This is still a viable alternative. And that's the end of the second section. But Christina, any questions, or do we have everything covered?
I have one question pending. It's to install an EV charging system at an assigned space in a townhouse. How would that work if there's not a driveway or a garage?
Good question. My default answer for something like that, because this does happen in DC, is let's see. I'm not entirely sure. Corey, do you know how that can be done, or do you have an answer to that by any chance?
I am not actually don't have an answer either. It looks like someone in the chat had attempted to provide some information about that, though.
Okay.
With respect to getting approval from an association board. So one thing I do know is if the charging cable needs to be like over a public right of way, like a sidewalk or something like that, that generally that's going to be a problem, but it's going to vary based on the location. So I think we have a better answer than that, unfortunately.
Got it. Okay. What I can do is I can maybe follow up with Kimberly next week, but whoever reached out about this, you can also post this on our listserv. We will drop those resources, but let me follow up with Kimberly next week. She's our program director. She might know more about this. So just stay tuned around that.
Do you know what the impact of solar is on the house resale value?
No uniform answer on that. It's supposed to be a supplement. It's supposed to.
I can answer in
Go for
the
it. Yeah.
in the chat. Typically is a dollar for dollar that value that you spent on the solar system that is added to the home.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, that's good enough. Okay. we good for now, Christina, or more questions?
What about the effects of the Chinese tariffs?
Uh-huh. Okay. So how much time do we have? Okay, I'll try and provide a brief answer to this, but in layman's terms, there was a lawsuit earlier this year by a solar company installer based out of California. They're called Oxen Solar, and the lawsuit was they alleged that a lot of the companies, to subvert the tariffs on Chinese installers, they're buying modules or equipment from other Southeast Asian countries. I believe there were 4 of them: Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and there was one more. And the allegation was those materials were actually coming from China, which is in violation of the UFLPA, which is the Uyghur Fair Labor Prevention Act. What that basically means is Western China is where the Uyghur minority or the Uyghur Muslims live. There are allegations that they are being subject to slave trade and concentration camps, and they're working on the manufacturing of these modules in these camps. And the Biden administration was doing its due diligence on these investigations. It sort of paralyzed the solar industry earlier this year. There were a lot of supply chain issues. It spooked a lot of installers. And that investigation has been suspended for now. It's not a permanent solution. It's been suspended, I believe, for the next 2 years. So, this is not a foolproof solution, but it's been suspended just to alleviate some of the stress on the supply chain and some of the other stuff. But to answer your question, I mean, our statement, and I believe we have also said this on our website, we support whatever the administration is doing. The installers we work with, they're getting their modules from the other Southeast Asian countries, and they're adhering to the local laws and regulations. So there should be minimal impact of that investigation, at least for the next year or so. There were some issues with the supply chain earlier, but not anymore. So if you do have more follow-ups, I can send more language around this, but in the interest of time, I will move on to the next section. All right, final segment. You know how solar works, the financing options. Here's how our co-ops work. And basically, this is an alternative to going solar on your own. Like I said, it's built around the bulk purchase model because we aggregate people together in a specific geographic region. We ensure that the installer, whoever works with us, already has a group ready for them for consultations, which reduces their soft costs and makes the prices in the co-op more competitive. That's the one big benefit. Secondly, we don't expect everyone to be solar experts. And the benefit of the co-op is once you join it, from day one, when you join the co-op to the day you get the system installed, and even beyond that, if you have any questions about the system or you want to get in touch with the installer, we will give you that support at no cost. We can mediate any discussions between you and the installer. And this is all done at no cost to you. So that's the other big benefit if you join the co-op. And number 3, if you do want to stay in touch with any of the other co-op members who went solar, or you want a second opinion or references for an installer, we can get that for you. We do also host some happy hours after the co-op is over. So if you want to get in touch with other folks who went solar, this is a good way to do so. And this is how the solar co-op process works. So just to use the Maryland Capital Area Co-op as an example, that co-op is covering Montgomery County and some of the other neighboring counties in the region. And you can find this on our website as well. And I'm sure you can find this in the chat as well. This is what the timeline looks like. It's anywhere from a month to 6 to 7 months long. So using that as an example, the first step is you attending one of these co-op info sessions. If you feel like solar is a good fit for you and the co-op is a good model for you, great. You can join using that link. If you feel like you're better off going solar on your own, we're happy to provide you alternative resources. The Maryland Capital Area Co-op was opened on April 1st this year. And what usually happens is people apply to the co-op, and depending on the roof, we add we add them to the group or send them elsewhere. And once we have around 30 to 35 people in the co-op, that's usually critical mass for us. That's when we say, okay, we have a large enough group. We're going to issue what we call an RFP or a request for proposal, and we invite installers to bid on the program. What happens then is for the Maryland Capital Area Co-op, we received, I think, 4 or 5 bids from local installers and 1 national installer. What happens then is our Go Solar team or our team vets them rigorously just to look for some red flags in their bids. We do a background check. We check their customer references. We just want to make sure that these are legitimate installers who may have worked with us in the past, and we just want to make sure that they have a good public reception or public review. Once we do the vetting, we then have what we call the selection committee, and that's another benefit of the co-op. We do not pick the installer. The selection committee is made up of like-minded co-op members. It's voluntary. You do not have to be a part of it, but if you want to be a part of the decision process, you can join it. And one of these weekdays, they sit together in the evening and they go through each of those bids from the installers and they pick one. And that's the winning bid. So for this, for the co-op this year, I believe we received 4 or 5 bids, and that selection committee sat on a Thursday evening and they selected SES, given how competitive their process was or the price was. And they selected them because SES has worked with us in 3 previous co-ops. So they do have a good reputation. Once the installer is selected, we then issue a public announcement to every co-op member, letting them know that, hey, look, the installer has been selected. Here's their welcome package. Here's everything you need to know. And after that, the installer sets up personal 1v1 consultations with every single co-op member. And then when it's your turn, they will assess your roof. If it's approved by them as well, they will customize your roof, or they'll customize your proposal based on your requirements or your requests. And once you receive that proposal, you have 30 days to sign the proposal. And during those 30 days, if you have any questions, you can run them by us. And if you need more time beyond the 30 days, let us know and we can mediate that process, but it's usually 30 days. And if you sign the contract, great. You can join us for happy hours or celebration after the co-op is over. But if you have more questions, or if you would rather wait to next year, no pressure. Just let us know. You can leave the co-op for free, provided you do so before signing a contract, and we will accommodate that process. And that's what the whole process looks like in a nutshell. So what's next? Like I said, 2 co-ops in the region. The first one is the Capital Area Co-op in Montgomery County and neighboring counties, which is over here. And you can also find both co-ops using this link. Just a heads up that Capital Area Co-op is open to the public for another 2 weeks through August 31st. We will not be accepting any more applications after that. So if you're still interested, you can still apply to the co-op, and it's being covered by SES. The second co-op, which is in Anne Arundel County and Eastern Shore, that's a smaller group. And what we have done is we are still accepting new members, but SES has already been selected for that co-op. So they're working with each customer or each member. And if it works out, great. If you want to join that group and you want to pursue alternative installers, I would be happy to send you more resources. But if you have more questions about these co-ops, you can follow up at MD team at solarunitedneighbors.org, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And with that, I think that's about it. It's usually Kimberly, but it's me today, Sukhwit Mishra. And it was a pleasure having you all over here. And I think Christina has left because I know she has a meeting, but Corey, any more questions or are we good?
A couple. There was a question I answered in the chat, but I think it's an important one for everyone to hear. Someone was asking about how we get paid to support our efforts. So you could just explain how the referral fee works.
Sure. So, like I said, there's no cost to join or leave the co-op, but assuming you join the co-op, the consultations are productive with the installer and you sign the contract with the installer, we get a fee for every signed contract of $600. This is for every co-op member that goes solar. And I believe that's the only fee we get.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, and it's neutral. It doesn't matter which installer gets picked. Doesn't matter about the size of the group. It helps us maintain neutrality, and it's the same referral fee or similar that they would pay anybody who sends them a customer. And there's another question in here. Is there an average percentage savings in energy? Obviously, some homes are going to use more electricity than others, but for your average energy efficient home, is there sort of like a ballpark about how much would be covered by solar?
To be careful about this one. I can't say because it depends on your roof size and some of the other factors which I covered, and your utility bills. So if you have a lot of power loads at your home and you have a smaller system, then it'll probably offset 20 to 30%. But let's say you have a big budget, which can offset 100% of your system, then you're not paying anything on your bills. So I wish I could be more specific, but it just depends on your roof, your electric loads, your average electricity consumption, and your system size at the end of the day. So unless you want to add anything, Corey, but I think that's my understanding.
No, that covers it. Someone asked a question about, sorry, things are skipping past here. What about systems that pair with battery packs for outages? I know you covered that earlier, but just briefly, are those available in the co-op, and how does that work?
Yeah, that option is available in the co-op. So how it works is SES is offering, I'm going to use the Capital Area Co-op as an example. They offer one base module. However, if you have a bigger budget, you can opt for the more premium modules or solar panels, and there are two of them. I cannot recall them off the top of my head, but there are 3 panel options. And then there's a battery adder. It's not an obligation. It's a nice adder to have. If you want to sign up for that, once you have the consultation with SES, they will give you an assessment on whether it's a good addition. And if you want to add it, you're welcome to do so. So what I'm trying to say in a lot of words is, yes, SES is offering panels along with the battery option, which is optional. And that comes with an added cost. We do not disclose prices outside the co-op because installers like to keep it that way. So I can't go into the specifics, but yes, this is an option in the co-op.
Looks like we've got a question about payback here. Your chart showing an 8-year payback, is that correct?
Average systems, yes. I mean, it's based on all the averages that we have set over here. If it's a relatively smaller system, let's say around 4 to 5 kilowatts or something around that, then that goes up by a couple of years. If it's a substantially larger system, then that comes down to around 6 to 7 years. But I would say 8 years is realistic for Maryland. DC, it's more like 4 to 5 years because of the SREC market. It also depends on SREC prices here. Assuming they remain uniform or somewhere similar to what we're seeing right now, I would say it's around 8 years. Okay, anything else, Corey, or are we good?
Let me just look one last one, make sure I didn't miss any here.
Sure.
So I think I answered this in chat, but just so people know, how do we arrange for an assessment for suitability for solar?
Okay, so if you can just send it to us at mdteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. I usually moderate that help desk, and what I'll do is I'll look at your roof using our software and what have you. We'll use a criteria which I discussed in this presentation, and I'll let you know if it's a good fit. After that, if you still want to, if you want to go solar on your own, that's fine. If you want to join the co-op, I'll add you to the co-op, and the installer does their own final review. If you're a 50-50, I'm usually very, very kind in that sense. I will add you to the co-op, but I'll give you a disclaimer and just say, hey, look, this is a maybe qualified. It's a gray area. I will leave it to SES or the other installer to determine if they want to work with you. So the first step is just reach out to us, and we will do the roof review at no cost to you. And I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Sukhrit. Someone earlier also asked about getting a copy of the chat in this as well. So I think just want to let people know, like, yeah, we can send that out as just a text file to anybody who wants to see that. That's something we can follow up with.
Yeah, what I usually do is I send out the recording, and then there are a lot of attachments. If you specifically want the chat file, I can just send it, just request it from me, and I'll send it to you on a 1v1 basis. The reason I don't send everything your way is because I don't want to spam every attendee with every needless data or what have you. So just let me know if you want that, and I'll be happy to send it to you.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, y'all. And this has been a busy session, but thank you, Corey. And Christina's gone, but thanks again for being here, and have a great day.